Welcome to the Non-Obvious Insights Show. I'm your host, Rohit Bhargava, and every week I go through the hundreds of news sources to curate the most interesting and underappreciated stories that you might have missed. Over the next 30 minutes, we'll talk about non-obvious stories, including the mysterious meme that raised $200,000 while inspiring Silicon Valley techies to beg for invites on an app that didn't exist. Disney's dangerous experiments with face swapping technology, the AI robot who landed a lead role in a new $70 million film, and how some airlines are making travel even more miserable right now. In addition, we'll talk about a perfume that smells like outer space, a surprising addition to the list of the most popular baby names of the year, and a new whistle that might be the future of refereeing. All that and another segment of my non obvious double take story of the week that should get you to think twice, and a selection for my non obvious book release of the week are coming in just a few seconds. We're live streaming to Facebook, YouTube, and Periscope, and the show starts right now. Happy Thursday, Non Obvious Nation. We are back with another edition of the most interesting and, yes, non obvious stories of the week. And I can't wait to share the stories with you today. Some fantastic stories. And the first one that I wanted to talk about really got me interested in the idea of buzz, because this one is a mysterious meme that apparently started last week from a group of Silicon Valley techies who launched a meme with a emoji. And there's an image of the emoji that kind of includes like eyes, lips, and then another pair of eyes. And this emoji led people to try and find out what it was about. Many people thought it was a new app that was going to get launched. And so people started clamoring for invites to the app. It was sort of like a in the know type of thing. People wanted to get invites from someone else. And so lots of people started asking for them. It turned out that they noted a couple of charities. They started a website, the group behind it, they started a website with a couple of charities. People started donating to the charities, hoping that maybe they could jump the queue by doing so. And they ended up raising $200,000 for various charities linked to the Black Lives Matter movement, because the group behind it was apparently a group of techies of color, and it was all an experiment. So there was no app, there was no nothing, but really it was this fascinating example of this huge buzz that was happening around something, and this culture that happens in Silicon Valley but also in other places, of just being afraid to miss out on something that's really taking off, and the desperation that is sometimes involved in making sure that you're part of the in group, whatever that in group happens to be, the in club. And this was one of those stories that just spoke to that. So really, really fascinating stuff, and slightly dangerous too if you think about it. The next story, there was actually kind of two components of this story that were interesting. And the first piece of it was Disney experimenting with face swapping technology. So really improving the ability to take a body that's moving already and impose someone else's face on top of it. And clearly, I mean, Disney is a media and entertainment engine. And so their reasons for wanting this sort of technology are pretty clear. I mean, they could even, one of the things the article noted was they could even bring back celebrities or actors who had died and put them back into film. So there's clearly applications for this, and making it look more realistic and more lifelike are important things. At the same time, I saw another story about a AI robot named Erica, who was just cast in the lead role of a new sci-fi film with a budget of $70 million for the film. And the relationship between these two, I mean, I think the stories were kind of coincidental, but the relationship of the two really got me thinking about whether, when we're launching this sort of technology and we're getting better at creating real lifelike experiences through basically fabricated AI robots or face swapping, who's going to maybe take that technology and use it in a way that isn't about entertainment, that is about other things that are maybe more illegal. And that to me is a major question that might have some real unintended consequences here. And as I was reading about Disney's experiments here, it struck me as a little bit ironic that the company that's dedicated to creating the happiest place on earth, and really about joy and entertainment that allows us to bond with one another, might accidentally create technology that somebody else could start using for much more evil purposes. And so it was just a yet another reminder, and I think I kind of mentioned this last week as well. It is yet another reminder that we have to really think through some of the things that we're launching out there and who might be able to take it and do something unintended with it. So, as many of you know who are watching right now or listening, This is a weekly show where we talk about the most interesting and non obvious stories of the week. And I see lots of comments coming through in our YouTube channel and also in our Facebook feed from people who are watching live. And I just want to say thank you for watching. Thank you for sharing your time. And I hope these interesting stories get you to think as they got me to think. I share them every week in an email newsletter. And if you get the email newsletter, then that might have been what brought you over to the video show. If you don't, and sometimes maybe you prefer to skim through the stories in email format, you can subscribe to that very easily. Just go to nonobvious.com/subscribe and you can get the email in your inbox. And this video show, this audio show, if you're listening just on audio, is about those stories, but also some bonus stories. And that's what we're going to do today. Talk about the stories as well as some bonus stories. And the next one that I wanted to talk about, the next topic that I wanted to talk about is actually three different stories. And sometimes what happens when I share these stories is they have multiple stories that relate to one another. And there was a piece in the Atlantic this week talking about firing the innocent. And there was this example of a guy who was just I think he was like a truck driver, and he had been kind of baited into doing like a little bit of a drag race with someone, and then he made a gesture and somebody filmed it. And because of that, he ended up losing his job and was called a racist, and all of these various things that were happening. And at the same time, I've been reading these stories of these actors who have been voicing characters that are from a different race. So the guy who was voicing the character of Cleveland Brown, who's not African American, but the animated character, is African American. And there was a story about durian, the fruit, which if you've been to Asia, it actually tastes pretty good, but it smells really bad. And there was this article from a Western perspective about all of these Asian fruits and talking about the experience of them. And as I put these pieces together, it got me thinking about how sensitive we are and how sensitive we should be about some of these things. And look, I'm not the person who can tell you how sensitive to be or what should offend you or what shouldn't, right? That's nobody's right to do, and that's not me that would tell you to do that. I mean, if I'm on a diet, I'm not going to tell you not to eat a donut. Like that's not how I think. But the point of this to me was that maybe the line is shifting in a good way, and that's what we hear a lot of media attention about, how it's shifting in a good way. What we don't hear as much about is how it might be negatively impacting people who were taking their chances to get ahead and who are maybe now being discriminated against because they took the chances and not necessarily because they were actually acting in a racist way. And I used to say, I mean, this is one of my perspectives, but I used to say that as an Indian, when I hear actors or animated characters with an Indian accent, I don't personally find that offensive. What I find offensive is when someone does a bad Indian accent, because then they're just acting and putting it on, and that's offensive. So if you have a good Indian accent, that's something different. Now, that's only my perspective, and I'm not saying that people should just randomly put on Indian accents. But my point is, we don't want to overcorrect the world either and just punish people for doing things and calling them racist for doing things when they actually weren't behaving in that way, because it minimizes the people who actually are racist and who do deserve that sort of backlash against the things that they do. And so these stories just kind of got me thinking about whether we're actively reacting in the right way or whether we're maybe overcorrecting. And yeah, another example I remember from some time ago was just reading about college campuses and stand-up comedians, and how there's so many stand-up comedians now who just won't go to college campuses anymore because they say that college students just can't take a joke. And whether they're used to doing racy material and getting away with it, or whether they have some grain of truth in what they say, I think the idea of being able to bond through laughing at some of the cultural differences is an important thing. And I don't want to live in a culture where we lose that, like where we lose our ability to say, look, we're different, and sometimes those differences are funny. And it's not because we hate somebody who's not like us. It's not because we're racist. It's because we're just observing something that's different and something that's funny. And so I don't know where the line is, and I'm not the one who can draw that line. And maybe the line is different for different people, but it just struck me that maybe in the sense of us as individuals looking at where to draw the line, like maybe we could think about whether we're drawing it too harshly in some cases. And that's what these stories made me think about. So, I have, like many people right now, been grounded in terms of travel. I'm not traveling at all. And this was one of those stories. I actually shared a story in my email that was about American Airlines throwing out social distancing measures, and I've heard that United is doing the same thing. And I'm a big United flyer. I've flown well over 1 million miles. I'm on my way to 2 million miles. I have their top status and everything. But it was disturbing to hear about how a lot of these airlines are not taking social distancing seriously. They're packing their seats. They're putting people right next to each other. And one thing that was interesting was, as after I published this story, I actually heard back by email from a couple of people, and one gentleman who actually was on a flight while he was reading my email this morning, and he emailed me and said, "Look, I'm on a Delta flight, and they have an empty seat in between everyone, and everyone's wearing masks, and they're doing it really responsibly." So I think maybe this is a case by case basis, and part of the story here is how there isn't any clear guidance on the top level from the leadership, from the FAA or whomever is the one who would be in charge of something like this, at least in the US. And therefore, airlines are just doing whatever they do. And I think that we're living in a culture here in the US where states are also doing the same thing. And the theme behind both of these things, I think, is in the vacuum of leadership, people just make up whatever they think they should do. And I, for one, have been kind of disturbed by what American is doing or what United's doing, so much so that I'm thinking, well, look, I've been a loyal United traveler for a long time, but if and when I get back on a plane, I'm definitely not going to go on a plane that's packed, and I'm not going to go with United or American if they keep doing that. I'm going to go with Delta because they're treating this much more responsibly instead of just taking the money, which is my perception of what any airline that just packs the seats is doing irresponsibly. And I think that the bigger lesson for any company around something like this is, look, this is a moment for us to define what we stand for. And for an airline, do you stand for taking that extra couple $100 and filling every seat for every seat? Or do you stand for, we're going to do this responsibly and leave seats open because we don't want to pack everyone together and be the cause or the vector that causes the coronavirus or any other thing to spread? And it's a big reminder that, like, we have to make those choices. Like, that's really important. Another story that I shared in my weekly email was about VR and the advances of VR. And this one was about how there was a system that was being tested where the sense of smell could be converted into a sense of temperature changing. So you were in a VR environment and you feel like it's getting hotter or colder based on how this VR helmet and connection to the nose is using your smell to be able to do that. And that, to me, was just another example of how VR technology is continuing to get better and better. And I sort of joked in my email that it's nowhere near the holodeck, the promise of what that holodeck was from Star Trek, if you're a Trekkie, but it's making it more immersive, and that's really interesting to watch how it's getting more immersive and what's happening next with that. So, just a quick pause here to remind you that if you're listening to these stories, if you're watching these stories and you enjoy them, you might also enjoy getting the email in your inbox, and you can subscribe very easily. Either go to nonobvious.com/subscribe or to rohitbhargava.com/subscribe. These are going to be really easy ways to get this email every week in your inbox directly. One story I wanted to share that is a kind of other piece, another story that is a feature that I've started doing every week is the double take story of the week. But before I do that, I want to share with you a summit that I've been promoting and talking about pretty actively over the last week. And it's a summit called the Future of Book Marketing. And I'm so excited about it because we're going to be launching it next week on Wednesday. And I've got now, I think, over 35 individuals that I've interviewed who are authors, booksellers, people from the publishing industry. I mean, it really is everything that I've wanted to know about publishing, and it's all in this one summit. And so I can't wait to release all of these videos. I can't wait to share the live webinar version of this and just talk about what it's going to uh, be like for authors to launch their next projects and how to think about the future of book marketing. And so this is an experiment for us. It's the first virtual summit that I'm holding and the first time that I'm going to get to share some of these things that people have been asking me about for a long time. that I've never really talked about. And so I can't wait to do that and to share that with all of you. So if you haven't registered yet, it's totally free. Just go to nonobvious.com/book marketing and you can register for that. And if it happens to be after the date and you find out about it, you'll be able to go there and still get some archive of many of the presentations. So definitely go there, check it out. If you have any interest at all in the topic of book marketing, I think it'll be a great summit. It'll be a great example. So I mentioned before that there's a feature that I like to do every week, and this feature is what I call the non-obvious double take. The non-obvious double take is a story that is presented, but that should make you think and maybe think twice. And this week's non-obvious double take story of the week is Amazon announcing that they're giving away more than $500 million in thank you bonuses to employees. And on the surface, that sounds like an awesome thing. I mean, thank goodness Amazon's finally showing up and delivering back to their employees and taking care of their employees. I mean, that sounds like an awesome thing. But when you think about how this is done, and this is one of the things that I think is heavily talked about in a book called Winner Takes All by a guy named Anand Giridharadas. And his book talks about how it is much cheaper for any company, any large corporation to give one-time bonuses than it is for them to actually raise the wages. And that's in fact what you're seeing here, exactly that. And Amazon's not the only one that's doing it, but I think the perspective that more people should start thinking about is $500 million sounds like a lot of money, but when you do it once and you don't improve the wages over time, you don't pay people more to do that job, you're essentially getting away with this one-time payoff. It's almost like settling a lawsuit before actually going to court and paying what you should pay if you're guilty. And this was one of those examples. And to me, it just reminded me that maybe we need to shine a little bit more light on exactly how this works and the fact that these aren't just the big altruistic stories that they seem to be on the surface. Another story that I was very curious about, this one definitely made me click, was there's a perfume that someone made that smells like outer space. And when I saw this, I was thinking, okay, first of all, outer space smells like something. And second of all, how do they know? Like, how do you know what outer space smells like? And it turns out they've interviewed astronauts and they've looked at the residue that's left on suits when those astronauts come back in. And apparently there's some combination of like burnt meat and raspberries, apparently. And there's actually a distinct smell, according to what they've figured out. And this distinct smell is part of the perfume, and it's a Kickstarter campaign, which of course I went and funded. So it doesn't deliver until October. So unfortunately for me and for Chavi and everyone else around me, I'm not going to get to smell like outer space until some time from now. But I'm very much looking forward to it. You know, we don't have the holodeck, but at least I can smell like outer space, which is kind of cool for someone who's super dorky like me. So smelling like outer space, that's what I'm doing. I'm doing that for you. I'm testing that out for you. So you know what that feels like. And maybe one day, if we ever get to see each other in person, you'll get to see what that smells like too. So uh, another story that I was reading with some level of curiosity was the most popular baby names. I mean, we all want to know what the most popular baby names of the year are, I think, because we just want to see like, hey, did I name my kid one of those things? And one of the stories behind this that was featured was that conveniently enough, number 100 on the list of most popular baby names for females this year, according to a website called The Bump, is Corona. So apparently there are some parents who are wanting to commemorate this moment of the virus for such a long period of time that they've literally named their kid Corona. And I was talking about this with the boys, and we all kind of agreed that if you're naming your kid Corona, you should probably question whether you deserve to like have a kid in the first place, because that's just a different level of cruel. You know, I mean, it's one thing to have somebody named Alexa, and now you've kind of grown up, and Alexa became Alexa, but like we didn't expect that, right? Like that was unexpected, so that was just like bad luck. But naming your kid Corona, I don't know. That seems like a odd, slightly cruel parenting choice. So anyway, apparently some people are doing it. So Corona. It's number 100 on the list of popular baby names. Who knows? Maybe next year it'll rise up higher, and maybe eventually it'll turn into a ungendered name, and boys and girls will be named Corona. Who knows? Nobody can track it. So far, the good news is virus has not made it on the list. So nobody's called their baby virus, which is good, I think. That's progress. We got to take it where we can find it. Another bunch of stories that I've been tracking it just relate to movies and in general movies and entertainment and how we consume entertainment. And this past week there were three different stories about that. So in Wired magazine there was a story about how we are returning to drive-in theaters, and many places are doing drive-in movies now, and it's hugely popular because you can socially distance and you can have a nice experience and see a movie through a drive-in. There's also the news that Hulu is going to be streaming IMAX documentaries, so people perhaps are upgrading their home TV setups. And the last story, which I actually asked the boys about, was apparently you can watch movies inside of Fortnite, inside of the video game of Fortnite. But the experience of that is you're watching it, you're playing an avatar, watching a movie as you're watching the movie as your avatar. And it's not something that I think somebody who's old and a parent like me can probably understand, but perhaps this will start to take off. And it was fascinating because the story that I was reading about was talking about the movie that kids were that well that players of Fortnite were actually watching, and one of the movies was Inception, which if you've seen that movie is kind of an odd choice to watch inside of a video game. It's like this really really meta sort of thing where like you're watching this movie that totally bends reality inside of a reality bending way inside a video game, and it was just like people are people are doing really really crazy things, and maybe they're just starved to get back into a theater and like see something. But it's just a really interesting way of thinking about movies and how we might consume movies. So anyway, that was one of the stories that I thought was kind of interesting this week. And there's another one that I have been tracking for some time. And look, this is one of those, sometimes I don't really know or have a prediction for how something's going to shake out, but there was a series of stories of just big changes in retail. I mean, Microsoft choosing to permanently close all of their retail stores. Barnes and Noble's been shutting many of their different stores and laying off different team members, which I've been really paying attention to as an author, but also as the owner of a publishing company. And I think this retail apocalypse that has been so often called that in so many different places in the media is going to start becoming very real, particularly when you think about products and services that could very easily be sold online, who don't need that experiential thing all of the time. And what I think you'll start to see, and what's already started to happen, is many of these big brands are questioning whether they need the consistent everyday investment of having a retail outlet versus just doing pop-ups, doing smaller short-term engagements around the thing that's launched, which with Samsung, if you look at what they do, like they do that all the time. They do a pop-up around the new product that's coming out, the new phone. They do a new experience, they sponsor an event, they do this short term, and then they take it down. And I think that these examples are pointing towards a future where that's going to become much more common in the world of retail, where we're going to see more pop-ups, we're going to see more events eventually when we can start to go out and kind of be close to one another and be somewhere. I think there's a large questioning right now among many retailers of whether they need that consistent store in the mall or that property that people can go to all the time. And instead of that, perhaps it's going to become much more based on appointments. I actually go to somewhere because there's an event going on or because there's something that I've chosen to go to. And so therefore, I'm going to go and be part of that. Another story from the New York Times this week talked about a new type of whistle. And I never thought about this. I mean, this is one of those interesting examples of how there are many other consequences of the virus and fear of virus transmission. And one of them is, look, when you're a referee, and I've been a soccer referee for many, many years and done that, you're taking a whistle, and anytime there's a foul, you're blowing into the whistle, which means you're basically shooting your spit all over the place. And if there's players or someone near you, that's probably not a good thing to do, even when we do get back to sports, because we're not going to want our spit flying all over the place. And so this story talks about how there might be a new type of whistle that basically is like pressing you, it emits a noise. And instead of blowing into the whistle, this type of whistle gets used by the NFL, it gets used by some of the large sports leagues. And it's not hugely significant in any of our lives. I mean, really, who cares about what whistle is used, right? But what I thought was interesting was that these small things that we really don't think about on a daily basis are being reinvented because they have to be, even down to the idea of a whistle that a referee uses in a game being reinvented. And that's, I think, one of the sources for constant interesting stories and observations. When we start to turn our view to pay attention to those sorts of things, we'll see more stories like that. And I think that's just a really, really interesting thing to watch. The last thing I wanted to talk about during the show here is the book of the week, the book release of the week. And this one is from a guy named Dave Balter, who I've known for many, many years. He was the former CEO of a word of mouth marketing firm called Buzz Agent that we used to work with back when I was at Ogilvy. And he's just done a lot of interesting things since then. And this book is a compilation of essays, but the theme that links them together is one that I think is really important right now in the world of leadership, which is, can you be humble and still have the confidence to be a leader? Or does humility come with this sense that, oh, you're a pushover, like I can dominate you because you're humble, you're not like an alpha? And if you think about this question and its relevance in the world right now, in terms of world leaders, or who's trying to be the sort of most out there in terms of their uh, hard line leadership style, this is a pretty important question, because I believe, like Dave does, and like what he writes about in this book, that we need more humble leaders. We need leaders who are willing to say, you know what I thought there, maybe I wasn't right. Maybe I can change my mind. Maybe I can listen to someone who isn't necessarily a CEO like me, or a president like me, or a leader, and still take something from what they say and change my point of view. I mean, that's an example of humility. And I think that it would be an amazing thing if we lived in a world where we had a little bit more of that. So that was the final story of the week that I wanted to share with you. And the last thing I will say, as a quick reminder for all of you, is that every week I am sharing non obvious insights, non obvious stories, things that I find interesting, and things that hopefully you'll find interesting too. And that's the point of this show, to share non obvious insights, to encourage all of us to think a little bit differently about the world, be more open minded, share those stories with one another. And to that point, I hope you really do get in touch with me and share some stories with me. One of the things I asked for in my email this week is, what are some more interesting, unusual media sources that you might read or watch that other people don't? Because I'm actively looking for more sources to add to my curation. Because when I'm doing that every week, I get a chance to see these stories, to pull them together, and to bring them to you, to hopefully add value for you. So please do let me know about that. I'm very easy to get a hold of via email. Please do subscribe to the email list. And thank you for listening to these non obvious insights and the Non Obvious Insights show.